We've got multiple cameras and multiple angles.
Whoa.
We're getting fancy. We are getting fancy. Guys, this is actually very, very exciting. We're getting close to Christmas. It's almost end of the year. I don't know, producer Anna, is this our last episode? No, we've got a few more to go before we wrap up the year. We do have a few more to go.
Yep.
It's exciting, guys. It's exciting. Are you guys enjoying the new venue?
I'm loving the new venue. I think it's great.
Yeah. Marketing loves it.
I think it's cracker.
Producer Anna loves it. The lighting, it's moody. I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you guys like the new venue? You know, give us your
gentleman's
feedback.
club vibe, isn't it?
It is.
Definitely.
It is. It is a gentleman club. Anyway, coming back to tonight's topic. That threw me off. That really did. Mate, we've got a family audience here. They want to learn about data and property and all this sort of stuff, right?
Can be learnt at any venue.
It can be learnt at any venue. Now, speaking of Friday Night Live, tonight's topic is going to be talking about the crystal balling, actually, the next year, the year 2022. There are a lot of opinions out there in the marketplace. People are talking about, are we going to see a boom? Are we going to see a bust? Are we going to see corrections? What happens if cash rates change? And there's a lot of conversation around this sort of stuff. So I thought we'll give it a little bit of a structure. Mark, you've been doing something incredible where you're doing state of the market, if I'm saying that correctly. I'm going to do a little plug somewhere, producer Anna, where you can put in the state of the market. Mark does them every Monday or Tuesday or something like that.
Tuesday.
Tuesdays. Do they come out every Tuesday? Tell us a little bit about it.
Comes out the same time that the RBA announcement gets made.
Fantastic.
So what should our audience know? So when they watch your state of the market, what are you actually covering in there?
Yeah, look, we cover a lot of what is happening in, I guess, the standard trends, your residential values, your change in median value, so on and so forth. Now, there's a lot of other bits and pieces like listings and whatnot in regards to, are vendors listing more? Are they listing less coming into the Christmas period? Or not just Christmas, but all year round.
So your supply, demand, growth, all of that, where the market's going.
Then we also go into a little bit of, some topics on, what's trending in the market, whether it be in the financial world or the development world. But we try to really cover a lot of information within this investment space.
Right, that's beautiful. So, guys, if you haven't watched State of the Market, I am pretty sure the episodes gets uploaded to our JR Prosperity YouTube channel.
Yeah, every Tuesday.
Watch Mark do those updates. If you really, really love to know what's happening in the marketplace, you want specifics about growth, about supply, demand, new listings versus last year this time, jump on that. But tonight we're going to talk a little bit about that, Mark. So I'm going to lean on your experience, your expertise to talk a little bit about the marketplace. Now, before we get into the episode, we have to ask our favorite question. Sean, how has your week been?
My favorite question of the week. My week has been chaotic. And this time it's really been chaotic in two ways, I would say. One in such a way where it's good, rushing around, trying to structure a few deals for a lot of waitlist clients. The market's so hot that we actually have two categories of clients now. So you've got your normal clients, then you've got your clients that are your waitlist clients. So it's gone that crazy in terms of demand. So chaotic in a good way, trying to organize stock. But for those of you that are waiting on me to get back to you on a bunch of things, I haven't forgotten about you. The things are on the way, so stay tuned.
You know how Sean is? He's got if you're a client and you're watching this, you would hope you're not on Sean's naughty list. You're on the nice list. Sean sits there like Santa. He's got his little list going for stock allocation, like gift for Christmas. And if you've been on the naughty list and you've been impatient, will you be prioritized? Of course you will. If you are a JR client, we love you. And thank you for supporting us so far. It has been incredible. Now, Mark, how has your week been?
Do you want the truth?
I want the truth. We only want the truth.
It's been cracker. It's actually been really good.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah.
That's really good.
We're getting ready for a big year coming up. We're not.
We actually
we've still got another month and a half to go. We're getting ready for the new year.
Mate, we covered this in a couple of episodes. As friends, colleagues, people in business, often a lot of people want to relax. It's the end of the year, blah blah blah. But
Take
no,
it easy.
we can see best time of the year, pedal to the metal. Yeah, and we're helping people, and it's almost overwhelming the amount of people that have started to contact us and help us. And there's a chance for us to beat our chest saying we've been doing a good job. And I'm really happy that so many people have actually reached out. We're not even going out and looking for people. People have been looking for us, which is an incredible place to be in touch with. And I'm really grateful for every one of you who have worked with us so far, thinking of working with us. And we really appreciate you working with us. It means a lot. Now, speaking of which, let's get straight into the marketplace and then we'll open up the discussion. But today, Sean, instead of starting with you, I'm going to start with Marc because Marc does the state of the market. So, Marc, can you help us, just give us a quick overview? We don't need to go into too much detail. If they want detail, they can go and watch your state of the market. But can you give us a quick wrap around nationally of what's happened in the last 12 months? And give us a little bit of an understanding, maybe state by state. And then after we have done that, in the second part of this conversation, we can speak to Sean, who's been heading our acquisition team, doing the tough job, wearing the boxing gloves, taking down developers and builders and doing all sorts of stuff, and helping our clients secure really, really good deals. But it's getting tough out there. So we'll talk to Sean about supply issues and so on and so forth. So stay tuned. Today's going to be a little bit more of a serious one. We'll stick to topic. I think a lot of people have been asking these questions. There's a lot of fluff out there. So let's take out the fluff, get into it, and give people an update. Marcos, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. So look, I think we're starting to see, if we look at major capital cities, because that's what we do focus on here at JR as well. We don't really go regional. We don't look at New South Wales, for example. We all know that. We look at Sydney. We look at Brisbane, Melbourne, so on. And we know that, excuse me, in the last 12 months, according to the end of October, so a month ago, Sydney is sitting at about 1.071 million as a median price.
Across all dwellings.
All dwellings.
Across all dwellings? That's
all dwellings.
Units included?
So it's an average. So
Wow.
So houses will be slightly higher, units will be a little bit lower, then there's townhouses in the mix, but across all dwellings.
Of course, but that's insane that the overall average, including everything's crossed a million. Usually it was always houses for a while.
Yep.
But now that they've got the overall dwelling up to over a mil, that's very interesting.
Yeah. Scary as well.
I've got some predictions in there about the buyer behavior, but I'll get into that afterwards. So that's Sydney.
Sydney. Melbourne is not too far behind, but there's actually quite a difference with Melbourne and where they're sitting at the moment. So they're sitting at about 780,000.
Median dwelling price.
Considering you're getting apartments in a CBD over there for only about 600 good ones. So that's excellent. Wow.
That is really good. Across all dwellings, that's interesting.
But then you've got Brisbane following closely behind, which is quite interesting here. And I think there's a lot of demand. And I think we're going to see probably Brisbane outshine Melbourne within the next 2 years. I truly do believe, because I'm looking at what's happening now and that flow-on effect that will happen in 2, 3, 4 years' time. Right? Forget the Olympics. That's still 10 years away. But Brisbane's sitting at the moment at 642. Okay. Now, we know that only 3-4 years ago, people were picking up great existing dwellings that were maybe, say, for example, 20 years old, 30 years old, in good parts of Brisbane for sub 400,000. I'm talking 3-4 bedroom houses that are, within reason from CBD, things like that.
Yep.
That is non-existent anymore. Then when we start to look at obviously where we focus on in specific suburbs and so on, we can see that even in a space of from between August and what are we in today? In November, or even let's say December now, there's probably been 20,000-30,000 increase.
Easy.
Yeah.
Do you know the funny thing? Is the other day I was on the Australian Bureau of Statistics board, and
As we are every couple of hours. We love our stats and our data.
data can tell you a story. Anyway, coming back, I promise the audience we're going to be good on this one. We're going to give them real facts. So anyway, long story short, we're looking at New South Wales. New South Wales had, 25,000-30,000 natural increase. Predominantly, it's talking about Sydney and it's around Central Coast, which is pretty much your Gosfords and your Central and Hunters pretty much become Sydney now, given the price growth.
Pretty much.
And then moving on from there, Sydney had about 20, 30,000 natural increase or whatever it was. I can't remember from the top of my mind. And that had a negative 13 or 20,000 immigration, negative. And Melbourne was very similar, close to Sydney. They had a negative 50,000 almost people, immigration that didn't happen, that got to potentially happen. So Melbourne lagged a little bit behind, where Melbourne's really rallying. And a quick fact for our audience, if you go back and look at the last 25 years, Melbourne's actually, from a percentage perspective, outperformed Sydney on a year-on-year growth basis, right? And speaking of Brisbane, and where I'm going with this was, and I agree with you, Mark, is Brisbane had the largest population growth, not from just COVID babies, if you will, but almost 20,000 people have moved from Sydney, and very similar number from Melbourne, and have made Queensland their home, which is really interesting. And you're right. So the Olympics hype, or the Olympics growth, is still yet to come. And I'm in agreement with you.
Well,
that's
I think
mad.
Another thing that's interesting as well is there's a lot of, I call it pseudo hype, right? Or let's just say pseudo equity on Canberra at the moment. Now, believe it or not, excuse me, Canberra is actually sitting, if we look at the chart from a dollar perspective, at $864,000.
Jeez.
So it's even higher than Melbourne, and obviously far outweighs Brisbane. But I think there's a lot of, again, a lot of hype surrounding, federal jobs, so on and so forth. Yes, but what else is supporting that? It's almost like, the way I see it, and again, people are probably going to crucify me for this, but it's like a mining town. There's only one source of driving factor for a specific city.
Do you know what I find really interesting about Canberra? And half of this sentence is speculation, half of it is factual. So what I've noticed in Australia, even in Sydney for that matter, if you really look at how, and when Sean comes back to me and goes, mate, it's a bloodbath out there, first I just be like, Sean, like, how bad is it? And Sean will tell us how bad it is in a minute. But it doesn't take a lot of people to move the market. What it does take is people with money to move the market. And what Canberra has is, because a lot of people have been working with the government, they're usually in higher pay and secure pay. And even if they're not working directly with, like, in the government, and they're not on the government's payroll, and they're working in IT or accounting or whatever other cybersecurity, or they're consulting, they're working for IT companies, they're on crazy day rates, like, making $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year. And because Canberra it's all around that little, Canberra's got this little golden triangle, right? And it's in and around those pockets that you can see. In fact, Canberra, the unit market at one point was ridiculous. You could buy a place in Canberra and get a 5.5%, 6% yield for doing nothing, and they had the lowest vacancy rates, right? So, and the second speculative part of it is the politicians own real estate, mate. They are the policymakers. Why would they want their own home ground to devalue? That is where their money is parked, and they want to see that grow. The third thing about Canberra is that when the pollies go, so does the circus. The media, the this, the that, so on and so forth. So it's always buzzing around those things. Announcements are happening, this is happening, media's going in there, the parliamentary meetings. And if you don't hang around politicians and people who work in the government space, they actually aspire to move to Canberra. So if they're located here and there, they're actually working towards going to Canberra from a job employability position perspective, building their political career, if you will.
Well, what I'd like to see, and we don't have the information on this just yet, but what is the duration of the tenancies down in Canberra for those that are renting?
It's a very, very interesting question. Very good point you made earlier, Kesh, about smaller businesses in Canberra. If we look at our own client book today, we have so many high income earners that are in and around the ACT and ACT sub counterparts, which is, you've got the ACT and then you've got the NSW side of ACT as well, with your suburbs like Gungahlin and everything, which still come under Greater Canberra, let's be honest. Now, all these guys that are in, I've noticed, the digital sector or in the IT space that are either contracting or in cyber. We've got a massive base of clients in cybersecurity down there. Some of them are actually working on a lot of privileged things to do with the Australian Defence Force as well. What I've noticed is that they work for companies that are not directly owned by the government, but these companies are contracted by the government to do a wide scale of operations. Some of them are so top secret that our clients can't actually even tell us what they actually do for work. And what I realized is that they... but there is a massive, massive economy of, yes, the direct politicians pay, the direct politicians' living costs and influencing the local economy, but there's a sub-economy down there, which is the everyday workers, not just the hospitality workers, but your IT sector, your digital sector, your marketing sector, that work on things on behalf of the Australian government money. Now, who's technically the richest entity in the world apart from the Catholic Church? Probably the governments.
Yep.
So you're looking at the governments in Canberra influencing all these smaller pockets that have created communities like boutique accounting services that do bookkeeping for these big digital firms, that do projects for the government. And who's helping them build the infrastructure projects? It's IT companies. And what I realized is with people that are doing the great resignation and the whole work from home, me personally, I believe work from home is nonsense. I don't know about you all. I'm exactly like Harry Triggyboff. Working from home is nonsense. But the idea that, okay, you can work for the company, but the company would always feel nicer. I'm speaking from a company perspective now. A company owner or a director would always feel more comfortable knowing that their employees can work from home, but they're still based in the city that the business operates out of. You know, because where we come from as human beings, as companies, as people, says a lot about who we are as well, right? It's like Kesh always talks about, if you're asked the question, where do you live? It's because people want to size you up. They don't really care about what the hell your house looks like.
No, where do you live? That's a very important. That's true. That's true.
Rubra. No, I'm just kidding.
Now we rep the Hills. This is coming straight from the Hills podcast studio. That's my plug. No, that's true. I actually, you know what? Speaking of rentability, and we'll move on from here. Is in the past I've actually met people who had really high paying jobs, and this is pre-COVID, going back pre-COVID. And the kids were at that age very close to HSC. They could move them out. And their families actually were well established, and they actually rented out 1-bedroom units in Canberra permanently. And some of the companies were willing to help them do that. Where I feel things are moving forward, I'm not really sure what the Canberra market looks like, because you're right, it's a very single direction. But what Sean said was such a valid point of, even if it's that single little point, well, I won't call it little, the government, Morrison government was happy to walk away. Mate, I'm going on a tangent here, which I promise not to, but I don't know, he lost $300-400 million on that submarine deal because he didn't want to go with the French for whatsoever reason. Mate, I just do some math, bro. Like, we're 25 million people, divide $400 million. He could have just... Everyone's mortgage would have been paid. I still don't understand in this country. We've got so many resources. I think we paid more in stamp duty in New South Wales over the last year than we actually got paid out in JobKeeper's Job Seeker. So I'm going to actually cover why that works that way. But mate, I reckon my 2 cents here with the Canberra market, I think nothing can bring it down. Nothing will. Will it experience normal market corrections? Every market does. But the police control it. They love it. People make bank. They love it. And yeah, it's a little town with powerful people. Little secret town with powerful people, and it goes.
Well, something else I wanted to say as well was rent vesting. We talked about this earlier today. And I think we even mentioned it last week in last week's podcast, where if we go back to, let's say, 2016, 17, it was even 18, it was a hot topic, rent vesting, live where you want and buy investments. And it was a similar concept to what people do in the States, in New York, for example, where majority of people, at least in the middle class, are not buying anything to live in within New York City. It's either the 1% or you'd be lucky if you got in early and you bought a little apartment and it's rented out to some guy who works on Wall Street, for example. We, over the last, let's say, probably start of 2020 to where we are today, it was all about, it's so cheap to buy your own home. It's live in your own home and pay less on the mortgage than what you would in rent. And I believe we're probably going to see that reverse effect again with rent vesting being talked about in 2022, 23.
Especially when the interest rates start creeping back upwards.
Spot on.
I've got some really, really interesting stuff around that, thoughts around that, but I agree. That's definitely going to come around. So talking about Canberra, so we covered Melbourne, we covered Brisbane, we covered do we know what Adelaide's doing or Hobart's doing or your other little pockets are doing?
Yeah, good question. So Adelaide is sitting at about 543.
Can you give us a little bit of only if you have the information, is just in the last 12 months, can you give us like the percentage of growth across a couple of cities?
Adelaide is sitting well and truly up there, just over 25%.
Wow, for Adelaide.
Adelaide.
For a sleeper city that goes on holidays all year, that's great.
I've actually got a
City
quick
of churches.
I'm telling you, city of churches, and mark my words. And again, if you can afford to buy in Melbourne and Brisbane, absolutely that should be a number one priority. But if you're looking for something which has got great, if you really go and look at the stats and you look at Adelaide's average rental yield and capital growth, it's a market where we talk about yield compression and all of that, but it's a really healthy market. And it's actually Adelaide at the moment, the government's working very heavily on transforming Adelaide to be a Silicon Valley-like city where they are getting a lot of startups. Elon, the rumors, I think he's already got the solar farm going, but Elon wanting to set up the Gigafactory. If I'm not wrong, Adelaide used to have the Holden factory or the Ford factory or something like that. So bringing that back, and where Australia's gonna really look at Adelaide as one of those pockets which is gonna lead charge in R&D in renewable energy, artificial intelligence, and the government is looking and working with businesses to actually create that. Now, what's really unique about Adelaide's one of the biggest city employers is University of Adelaide and University of South Australia, two big universities, and that they attract a lot of overseas students who usually, again, based on the skilled occupation list, whether immigration likes it or not, people are coming here and studying particular courses that the Australian government, so there's a skilled occupation list that you got to tick off before you immigrate, right? And these kids are coming from overseas and they were studying in Adelaide, but because they were doing, say for example, I did network securities engineering, or I was an architect, or whatever it might be, there was very limited jobs in Adelaide. And usually the main jobs in Adelaide used to be service industry, like small service industry. You got like your regional banks, and if you got lucky, you'd get like you were with the Adelaide Police or something like that in IT. But Adelaide, and they used to have a lot of brain drain. So people used to come into Adelaide, get regional points for immigration. As soon as they got their permanent residency, would actually leave Adelaide and move to Melbourne, which is the closest capital city for jobs. Yep. And what has slowly started to happen is that people have become smart, and hence the whole Brisbane movement as well. Like, if I can make the same amount of money that I do make in Sydney and pay 1/3 or less, right? So we talk about rent vesting in Sydney because buying a house here is crazy expensive, and outlaying so much cash is stupid for non-tax effective debt, right? You're basically stuck. And the government wanted you to buy a property so that you're stuck for 30 years. So they're guaranteed you'll continue to work and pay taxes. It's a win-win for them. And when you buy a house, and they incentivize you buying houses because that created jobs and so on and so forth, right? But Adelaide is actually one of those cities that is on my radar. Again, I'm not going to prioritize Adelaide over like your Melbournes or Brisbanes and so on and so forth. But Adelaide, for a cash flow play, is not bad at all. Adelaide from an affordability place is not bad at all. And I'm pretty sure this year Sydney did about, and mate, you got the stats, but I think it did 20-25% this year, very similar performance, and so did Adelaide. So if you were looking at for 25% growth within your budget, if you had $1 million, you made 25% on $1 million in Sydney. If you didn't, and you had $500,000 or less,
you would have still made 25%.
You have grown your wealth by 25%. So Adelaide actually is a little cheeky pocket, I think, for people who are looking for that cash flow play, I'd say, and don't want to take the regional town risk. Like would I buy in Adelaide over Bathurst, Adelaide? You know what I mean? Just long term, when I look at what it's going to look like.
I think we've got to be mindful as well in, let's say, the next couple of years. We're going to start coming into, we're talking about housing affordability crisis. That's the hot topic at the moment in the media. Now, I think in the new year, we're going to start seeing a lot more on rental affordability crisis.
Mate, housing affordability is fake. Work harder. No, I'm joking.
But what I'm saying is,
No,
we've got to
I
sell,
agree
we've
with
got to
you. I
sell
agree with
media, right? For example, so we are going to see a lot of this discussion. Channel 7 will get on at 9, and they'll have these reports. I didn't want to put a rubber ducky up then, but
Rubber ducky.
they're going to give us these stupid discussions around why it's better to do something or whatever, and they'll have a 5-second segment with some guy who talks finance for 1 minute, and anyway, I'm not going to get into it, but I guess what I'm trying to say is we are going to see a lot more of rent going up as well, and if anything, you're going to start to see Sydney, for example, they're going to suffer. A lot of people in Sydney are going to suffer. A lot of people are going to have to turn to what do I do with my money? I'm not silly anymore. I know my money in the bank does nothing. Can I afford to buy a house here in Sydney? No, that's out of the question. What's my next best option? Can I even afford there? No, that's not right. I'm just going to rent and most likely park it into an ETF, for example, to make a better return, and then park it into property. But while we're doing that, we're seeing these rental increases happen quite significantly. I wanted to bring that up with you just very quickly. Is if we just look at houses, right? The jump in rental percentage just in Sydney is at 9.9%.
Go out, Sydney. We needed some rental boost.
Well
bro.
done, landlords.
Landlords for life.
We'll get Anna to put these up on the screen so people can see.
Yeah.
But the reason I had the claps in there, because honestly, Sydney was a long time due. Our yields
for rents.
Our yields really started to dip, and with ultra low interest rates, people were having to negatively gear, which I just think it was silly. So I'm actually happy as a landlord. I'm pretty sure some lefties would be really upset with me, but it is what it is. As a landlord, that I'm slowly seeing that rental recovery come through Sydney.
Well, I was going to say, I think this is all as well on the back end of COVID rents being put to bed.
And
get them back
We were
where they
having
should
this
have been.
conversation while having a drink just outside. We had someone come up going, and I'd made a joke. I said, "You're gonna have to pay me rent if you borrow that thing from me again." And he goes, "Oh, I know about rent. I pay $500 a week." I'm wondering what he's renting for $500 a week. Probably the shoebox down the road.
And you know what? It's interesting. So the average rent at the moment is, if I'm not mistaken, about $550 in Sydney.
But that's average.
That's average, correct.
Which means tiny dwellings.
That could be really dodgy.
Giant
that could be really dodgy suburbs.
But regardless, that's $550. But when I was younger, let's say 10 years ago, I always had this rule of thumb. I was like, I'm never going to pay, if I'm living with someone or if I'm living on my own, no more than $500 a week. Because in my head, I was thinking that's more than enough to give you a sustainable pad, give you what you need. I mean, we're young at the time. You're never at home, right? You use it to sleep and that's it. And now we're looking at $550, and that's going to go up. I think it might even be closer to $580 now, if I'm not mistaken. We'll be going up. But seeing rents of, let's say, $600 or $700, when you look at them in Sydney, you go, oh, that's cheap. That's a great little place to rent out for $700.
You know the funny thing?
Go, wow.
I actually want to do an episode. Producer Anna, if you can make a note of this. Actually, I've got a whole presentation, if you will, like click presentation about talking about why some properties, even through the rental boom, are going to suffer because they do not qualify to be good rental properties. They have become obsolete. They don't have the features, facilities of the newer style of properties. So if you ask me, would I be renting a, pardon my French, a little box fibro in Wentworthville for $500 a week? No, I'd rather have a 2-bedroom swanky apartment somewhere to pay the same sort of rent. So saying that, we're going to take our quick subscription break, and we're going to come back and talk about the actual thing of why we're facing scarcity in the marketplace and what Sean faces on a day-to-day basis and what should people know. Speaking of this is your chance to go get subscribing to our channel, guys. Come on, subscribe, hit the like button, the bell icon. You've got 30 seconds to do this. Less. Actually, let's make it 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That was it. If you haven't subscribed as yet, you're not allowed anymore. This is Friday Night Live. We sign it. No. We're going to be back. Give us 1 second. No, producer Anna, are we back? We are back from the subscription break. I don't know which camera to look at. What? I hope you have subscribed. If you haven't, I'm not going to. It's Christmas time. whether you have subscribed or not, I hope you have a lovely, lovely Christmas. No.
Just please subscribe. We love you.
No.
Subscribe right now.
You're too nice. Sean, they're not allowed. I gave them a time. They didn't subscribe. Now you got to sleep in the bed you made. Not allowed. Now, speaking of rental growth, I want to come back to that topic, and I really want to unravel that whole topic. But Sean, just so we can come back to you here, there is a massive, massive problem in stock in general. Used, new, old, whatever terms people want to use. But what's the ground reality? You've been heading the acquisition team, and I know for weeks now people think, why does Sean go, it's chaotic? It's not chaotic because of our lovely clients. Our clients are awesome. It's the finding the right property for the right person, and actually being able to put a deal together is just ridiculous. So Sean, give us a little bit of insight. If you can take us state by state, give us the Hunter example, if you will, of what happened, what's happening in Brisbane. I've heard rumors that Brisbane is the most undersupplied land market, 70 points drop. I don't know, but Sean, give us the insights.
Sure. So what we're actually dealing with at the moment in Australia is something very, very strange.
Very strange.
When I say Stranger it's very things. Strange, it is very strange. Yeah. Strange in a good way for a lot of investors targeting what I like to describe as emerging markets. Now, what emerging markets are is, let's go from north to south. So in north, we've got obviously Brisbane. Brisbane, we've got a situation where pre-COVID boom, there was only about 2 years of available land supply. And 2 years of available land supply because it was actually a very, I would say, mid to low demand market over the last 10 years. And when it was a mid to low demand market, you're looking at a situation where good pockets still rose quite well in terms of their 5% year-on-year growth. Some pockets at 8%, areas that became affluent overnight sort of have always done well. But after the COVID boom, which really ensued after about May, June last year, which is 2020 terms, you're looking at a situation where Brisbane's 2 year of available land supply actually completely evaporated in about May this year. So it took about 12 months. So in about 12 months, the 2 years worth of supply vanished, which is fair enough. Now, every time you're doing land developments and new properties and existing properties, you get a situation where there's a certain number of buyers and a certain number of sellers. Now, the challenge that we're facing is Brisbane got a lot of attraction because of the great resignation, the great work from home, the great, tropical climate, but still work from home, keep my job whether I work from Melbourne, whether I work from Sydney. So a lot of my clients personally actually made the move up there. A lot of my clients actually bought and built dream homes up there as well this year and last year. So we're looking at a situation where for the first time in history, we actually noticed something very interesting with the Brisbane market, which was that Brisbane's job offerings for white-collar jobs started to match the pay levels of what Sydney and Melbourne were almost offering as well.
Yeah, you're right. 100%.
When you look at a situation where the job offering matches are getting closer, but someone's getting a mortgage which is worth a third or half of what a Sydney-Melbourne mortgage is, it's almost a surefire decision for families that think logically, that think financially and make the move up.
Yep.
So making the move up there, obviously we had international border restrictions, which meant that there was no international net immigration coming into Australia. Keeping that aside, we still had interstate migration. So the number of people leaving in droves in Sydney, leaving in droves in Victoria. I think Victoria had the bad end of the stick of the lockdowns, let's be honest. They were locked down for pretty much 2 years straight.
I think Victoria had the longest, if I'm not wrong,
in the world.
In the world. Is that correct?
100% correct.
My heart goes out to Victorians. And the weather so you were indoors.
And the worst thing is some of our best clients, like some of my favorite clients and some of our high net worth clientele actually come from Melbourne. And they were frustrated, sick of it, but they actually made the wise move of doubling down on the investment market during this emerging boom. So when you're doubling down in a market like this, you've got a situation where demand's about here, supply's only about here.
Yeah.
And what happens in emerging markets is if you combine affordability with now the attraction of not just home buyers. So there is going to be an end to this home buying activity. But what's coming in off the back end of successful home buying activity is investors now rushing the woodworks. So much so to the point where we've had investors having horror stories of being on waiting lists for 2 months, 3 months, only to get their properties tucked away from them from under their feet because landlords and developers and in certain estates have decided to prioritize the poorer local owner-occupier market first, which in all theory and all fairness is probably the right thing to do.
Yep.
But that being said, it's actually blocking investors from getting in and actually deploying cash into the marketplace. So we're dealing with the reason it's always chaotic is because ever since March or April this year onwards, we've noticed registered supply evaporated in markets like Brisbane and Melbourne, which was a first. For Sydney, it already started happening in October, September last year.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Melbourne and Brisbane very rarely have like these crazy. Sydney, since I can remember, when I started my life as a real estate agent, bro, there was a ballot system 3 seconds in. Like 3 seconds in, one little Channel 9 thing, the market's off. And there we go, we got the ballot system. And Sean, you and I were speaking this morning, 18 months ago, literally. Like even through COVID, the first version of it, when Trump went the Chinese virus. There was a Trump administration in the US. I'm talking when COVID was just, I think it was 2020.
China.
Yeah, Jan Feb it started.
Yep, right. You could still go out and put some deals. There was uncertainty. But it's just, I've never ever seen, Sean, like, why is it, tell me something, why is it taking them so long to produce the real estate, the land?
Sure. So pretty much no one anticipated the boom in the first place. So the rapid surge of demand came from the back end of the government boost. It came from the back end of stimulation via lower and lower interest rates. And if you're looking at markets that only really had supply of a year or 2 years, you're getting a situation where to actually create available land, you need a lot of cooperation from governments. You need a lot of cooperation from councils. Melbourne, dating back 20 years ago, I don't know if you both know this, but Melbourne actually has something called an urban growth boundary, which actually blocks supply of new homes. And the urban growth boundary was actually a bid for more sustainable economic development, which I understand makes sense. But in reality, there is a lot of land. There is a lot of land in Sydney as well, but Sydney actually faced something which was a little bit of a greed scenario last year. So get this, you're getting situations where developers knew that the market was heating up. There was a lot of buyers ready. There were 100 lots available to be released, but they would only release 12 or 10 lots at a time every single month, instead of releasing the 100 when it could have been.
And
at
you know
prices
what?
that were at quite
all
stable.
These buyers then were all the fresh, I've got 25 grand to my name. I'm getting a 20 grand builder's boost. I'm getting this, I'm getting that. So these guys are absolute naive, like never owned real estate. You know, probably have your dad walk through and go, oh yeah, knocking on walls. So, you know, like I've never understood that. What sort of due diligence knocking on walls? But is that person, and then the developers got really sharky with them where they went, wait a minute, this little blue-eyed boy or girl, they've never bought real estate. Oh, they won the $25,000 builder's boost. Let's slowly but surely. In fact, didn't New South Wales move up their stamp duty concession? I think it went from $600,000 to $800,000. Again, Sydney, 3 seconds.
Which for $800,000, you still can't really get a clean freehold house anyway.
No.
So these stamp duties are irrelevant. The builder boosts were irrelevant. The builder boost, the minute they were announced,
they adjusted the prices.
The prices were adjusted in about 4 hours after the announcement.
100%.
So, but they were announced in a very weird way. So two things have happened right now, right? The builder boost caused a lot of upfront demand in the market, but now there's been so much demand that builders right now are actually under a little bit of trouble. They're under a little bit of stress because the cost of supply due to supply chain issues, the cost of laborers, the cost of so many things when it comes to actual building has gone through the roof. A lot of people are not actually going to be making the money that they thought this time last year, and big groups have already gone liquidated. Mate,
I saw, I'm just trying to look for it while I speak to you on building. Sorry to jump in there. Someone was telling, I can't find the article, but apparently building is going up 3.5% a quarter, 8% so far from June or July so far. So basically, if your build cost on a property was say $350,000, if you're building a real basic little house, right? 8.5% of that is up by $29,750. If you were building an $850,000 property, 8.5% on that is up by $72,250. Sean, you were telling me about, and again, We don't want to like drop any names here or anything, but like you were telling me there were very large building companies that actually cancelled contracts, if that's correct, and redid the contracts because they couldn't.
Pretty much like the country's largest builder, volume-wise, without name dropping, had to cancel about 350 house and lands this year. Because they could not be delivered on last year's prices on the promises. So here's the double-edged sword, right? Emerging market means that the values are going to go up really high. Values are going to go up really high because right now in 2020, we're going to get to the 2022 predictions now. But when you're getting a situation like this, because land is unregistered now, so as an investor, you have to be careful of who you work with. You're working with the right people in this sort of market.
Yep.
What you got to make sure is that whatever prices you're being promised today actually get followed through on, and that hasn't actually happened.
And they deliver on it.
And it's been delivered on, but that actually hasn't happened in 2021. So in 2021, a lot of people who got all the best discounts last year are getting approached this year going, sorry, we need $25,000 extra to do.
Here is a variation. Here is a variation. Actually, you know what? We should do a whole episode. We should get Divian in with you and just talk about builder tricks one day.
Yep, 100%. Jack will be a great person to jump on for builder tricks.
Yeah.
Variations, allowances, it just never ends.
Right.
So even to win a really good luxury tender, what a good builder will do is they'll say that, okay, here's a competitor quote for 1.5 mil. They'll say they can deliver it for 1.4. And the buyer believes it and the buyer goes for it. But the builder knows they're going to make up the margin anyway by slapping a couple of variations in there.
Mate,
so it's
there's so many places. You cover slabs. Anyway, we'll do a whole episode on that.
Exactly. So this is why it's more important that now more so than ever, you really make sure that if you're working with a crew, for example, what we do is we have exclusive contracts. So exclusive contracts make sure that your deal is done in a certain way where you will not be stung back for extra costs beyond what you signed up for. That's the power you get by getting a negotiated exclusive contract. So you have to be careful with who you're working with in environments like this to actually get ahead, because the opportunities are out there. They're still endless. There's still a lot of money to be made, but in the right market. So we have to make sure that you avoid, obviously, your saturated markets and so forth, so on.
I completely agree with you. So now I think we're going to go in a circle. Mark, I'll start with you. Okay. 2022 predictions. I know I personally hate crystal balling. I think crystal balling the market is the most scummy thing, clickbait thing you can do. But you know what? In the world of YouTube, if you haven't subscribed us yet, we got to do it. But let's have a little bit of fun, okay? Nothing too serious, but 2022, and let me pre-frame here. The borders are opening up. The people that were supposed to come are going to come in droves and droves of people, wealthy people, because they've understood the cost of real estate is up. So whether they're coming students, migrants, wealthier people, because whether people like how we've dealt with COVID or not, we have done a lot better than a lot of other places. And I feel blessed to be in Australia through this pandemic. We were really, really protected, cushioned, if you will. Yep, you can have first world people problems, but we did really well, and a lot of the world has noticed that. Hence, the Olympics being Japan had a big fail, and so on and so forth. Anyway,
massive fail.
Mark, coming to you, what are your, just in a span of 2 minutes, 3 minutes, what are your 2022 markets? What is going to rally? What is not? And if you were to buy something next year, what markets would you be looking at, and why?
So one big thing I touched on this week was a recent acquisition by a large developer, and there's been a lot of articles on this joint venture partnership that's going on between a financier and this developer. They're going out in the anticipation of developing 5,000 units over the next, I don't know, call it 5-10 years, call it 6 years, in order for a build-to-rent model. Now, this model has been quite big overseas for quite some time. Australia's quite new to it. I think we're going to see a lot of, again, affordability being a big issue. APRA continuing to step in, causing further drama for people that wanting to get into the space. It's just going to be harder for them, and we're going to see obviously a lot more people being pushed to rent, not by choice either. Now, again, it doesn't have to be a bad thing, but we are going to see a lot more of these larger developers holding on to stock, building, renting out, and just running massive rent rolls, which is, again, great for them, and still great for the population, because they're going to be obviously developing let's say, properties that are going to be affordable as well. You can't be charging someone $1,000 a week in rent in Parramatta, for example. It doesn't work.
Oh, this is like a quad bedroom penthouse.
Yeah, exactly. But
You better have a helipad
that's
with
one thing we're going to see, at least in 2022, is a lot of talk of, I think. A lot of build-to-rent modelling.
For Sydney, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, we're going to see a lot more talk around pros and cons of renting and the affordability. Again, as you mentioned, with borders opening up, a lot more people coming into
There's
the
going
country.
to be a lot of rental pressure because the first place to fill up is the city because of the universities.
Well, can I say the rental pressure is going to be on those that are already locals or a domestic market, let's say, because you're right, you are going to get a skilled labour force, let's say,
With capital. They're flying in with money.
That's right. And I mean, they might not buy a house straight away, but they're going to certainly be able to outbid you when it comes to a rental and say, hey, they're asking $500, I'll give you $550 a week.
That's it.
No investor's going to turn that down.
It literally happened to my property that went on rent. You know, it was advertised for about $550, or that was $550, and the agent on the day it was listed got told that someone's ready to rent it out for $595 and pay 6 months of rent in advance.
Deny. No, I don't want it.
No. I don't want your money. Of course we do.
Of course I took it, because you have to as a right investor.
So that is Sydney, and that's the rental model. The next prediction.
Look, I think the next prediction is we're probably going to see another wave of, let's say, larger development capital coming into the country. I think we're going to see a lot more, let's say, whether it be Chinese, Indian. I think there's going to be a lot of Indian cash coming across. I don't know. That's just a speculation. But I think we are going to see a lot more of that come into the country on a larger scale. I'm not just talking about buying properties. I'm talking about logistic warehousing, industrial parks, things like that. And I think we're going to see, I mean, if we look at leaders, for example, Goodman Group, these guys are leading charge, and their pipeline had grown by 30-40% within the 12-month period. Usually their pipeline is committed to it's happening. It's just a matter of, you know, when the time is right. But I think we're going to see a lot more of that, a lot more industrial development. You know, when Parramatta Square finishes up, for example, there's going to be a massive push on, let's say, external CBD markets.
Huge.
Let's call them.
Yeah.
Right. And we're going to see, again, as Sean touched on already, there's a big market swing of people going up north. A big market swing of what do you call it? The great
resignation.
Resignation, yeah, where people are, you know, saying,
And the great relocation.
yeah, and a lot of people are saying, you know, work is in my favour now, not the other way around. I don't need to be the slave to them; they're the slave to me because I'm skilled.
Yeah.
Right? And we have a lot more people that are skilled these days coming into the country. So I think it's going to definitely open up a new, in a positive way, can of worms for the country. We're going to see a lot of healthy rent, I think, as we mentioned, in Sydney alone.
That's really good for our clients who've actually jumped in, and they're going to see, because we always talk about we need that rental growth to support our growth, because you just don't want equity, you want that rental growth, which is absolutely awesome. Just to add to that, I think where that whole market, affordability market's going, I think Brisbane and Melbourne both have room. They're suburbs today as we speak in Melbourne, for example. That could be very much compared to your Kellyvilles or your Oran Parks or your middle ring aspirational suburbs. Oran Parks not so much middle ring, it's outer ring aspirational suburbs that are still relatively affordable compared to the incomes. But mate, I agree. I think rents are going to be much stronger coming through, and with interest rate rises, we're going to see rental rise because affordability will become further a crunch, which I just find really stupid in Australia, where APRA is trying to RBA the cash rate. Stop stuffing around with a cash rate. Release more land. Whoever's part of the planning, you are a dumb. Right? Speaking of which, you know, people not releasing land. Sean, what are your 2022 outlooks?
You mean apart from the world crashing and burning and real estate being worth crap?
No. Leave that to 60 minutes.
Oh, sorry.
Please leave that to 60 minutes.
All right, well, my real prediction for 2022 is a slower growth phase in saturated markets. So when I say a slower growth phase in saturated markets, you're looking at Sydney's leafy suburbs calming down a lot more. But Sydney's emerging suburbs, such as southwest, Spring Farm, Appet Valley, Wilton, areas like this up north, Hunter, Central Coast, still having a bit more of a robust growth performance over the next 12 months. Because there's still a lot of built-up buyer demand, for example, in the Hunter Valley as well. So I see those markets doing quite okay, but saturated leafy markets in Sydney I see coming
Everyone's
down.
just overpaying drinking that wine in Hunter. They're just like, oh, this is great.
I think they all went for wine tasting before they all threw the bids on. But
I
it was
think
weird because
that's
we had
the sales process. Get drunk, then sign.
we had so many buyers from like outside the Hunter still not able to get in during the mad buying rush. So it's an interesting one. Looking at 2022, I really, really feel, personally at least, that given all the data, everything that we've seen, Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide, these three cities, Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide, in that order, are going to have really, really strong equity growth years for their emerging markets. And when I say emerging markets, I'm not talking about inner ring, because inner ring's sort of already almost reached where they should be.
Oh yeah, your Toorak's and your St Kilda's and your all
Baldwin North, Ivanhoe, places in Brisbane like Rochdale, like we were looking at earlier in the year,
Mate,
shockingly
forget
high.
that. Geelong's already over $1 million, bro. Like that's it's happening.
Yeah.
It's finally happening, and so I see the middle to outer ring in those areas with emerging land markets, areas that are 45 kilometers, 45 minutes drive, sort of west southwest, really picking up and shaping up really well. But that's just for 2022, so not as high of a growth figure that we saw in 2021. I don't see it being 20+%. I do see it being below 15%, but I do see it being above 5 to 7%.
Are you ready for mine?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna go hard. Right, I'm gonna go real bullish on this. So this is what I think is gonna happen. Sydney's gonna have certain pockets that are really gonna kick off and continue to kick off when the money comes. You're gonna see a massive disparity in prices very soon. Everything road. And then you're gonna have the really affluent pockets actually show them who's got money, who's got bank, and you're going to see them to continue to grow in rent and in capital growth. I reckon Melbourne's going to do what Sydney did last year.
Yep.
I really think some pockets of Melbourne are really undervalued for what they should be. If I compare them from an infrastructure, proximity to the city, demographics, all of these pockets, I think certain pockets of Melbourne are going to be cracker. I wouldn't be surprised if I saw a $660,000 property climb up to that 800, 850, especially with that 25% co-deposit where the government's actually on the title with you and they want to enjoy that growth. I think that, honestly, in my opinion,
It's a $500 million boost just for Victoria as
mate,
well, guys.
it is, and I just
$500
think that's going to keep getting stronger and stronger, because what they realize is with low interest rates and government grants, Sydney saw a really big up, but the government only got stamps out of it, where Melbourne's going, I want stamps and equity in this property for you, which is incredible play. I think Brisbane is going to continue to rally. The only thing is going to be, will Brisbane be able to continue to supply the jobs for white collar workers, or are large companies like your Facebook, Google's not going to really care whether people come in or not? That'll be very interesting to see. I think with Facebook just saying metaverse is here, I think that working from home might be a reality. What that looks like might be a little bit different. I think Perth might be very, very interesting. It's a space to watch. Great yield. Some pockets of Perth are ridiculously good. And long story short, Brisbane, Melbourne, Sydney, Adelaide, all your markets. The first one to rally is always Sydney, which is going to start to slow down. And you're right. 20, 30, 40, 50% growth is not sustainable, but the growth is not going to stop. Just because you don't have the money doesn't mean that other people don't, right? And we're going to see this boom was driven by the investor market, the first home buyer market is going to be overtaken by the investor market, because I'll tell you what, right now developers and builders think, oh yeah, we stuff you investors. When all the homeowners are absorbed, they're stuck in 10, 15 years in that property. They're not moving. They need money to sustain themselves. And the only people who have money, who've been owning property for the last 5, 10, 15 years, who have equity, right? And who have made more money than ever before, are going to be back into the marketplace. The borders open up, and mark my words, the borders open up. You have no idea what you're going to see. the biggest change you're going to see in prices, and I'm going to look in the camera and tell you, all the people who made these stupid, I'm not talking about tree changes to Brisbane, who went into these weird little regional towns saying, oh, I can go live my life. I've soon realized they don't have proper hospitals, electricity, internet, shops. They're sick of it. The kids are not getting access to great schools, and they are going to slowly, with their head down, walk back into capital cities or close to capital cities because that is not sustainable. So the weird places that went up, again, I'm not talking about your Byron Bays and Gold Coast. I'm talking about like really weird places, like if you bought in Broken Hill and made some money, right? These places are really going to get a backhanded slap, and you're going to see a massive, this is my prediction, you're going to see a massive correction because they were artificially inflated. That growth is not sustainable, and rich people don't want to live in bum towns. And real estate is only worth what one is willing to pay for at any given day. And to outbid someone, you got to have capital. Capital is in the cities, or in and around the cities, because capital is generated in the cities or in and around the cities, right? So this is my prediction for where it's going to go. And I'm really, really excited to where it's going to go. And irrespective of when people ask us, is it a good time to buy? Always. Always. On that note, this has been Friday Night Live. Hope you guys got some value out of tonight. But before we wrap up, we've got literally 30 seconds before cameras die on us. So, Sean.
Do we actually?
Yeah.
Wow.
Rapid Robins from you, sir.
Rapid round robins. Gentlemen, pick your one suburb, only one, that you expect to be the best performer in the whole market in 2022. Go for it.
Point Piper.
Okay, so Point Piper from Growth. Kesh, yep.
Five Dock.
Five
I'm
Dock.
just going to say that.
You know what? No, in the actually the inner west.
No, not Five Dock.
No, the inner west. You're really gonna start seeing that rippling effect come through.
Well, you know what I've always said? I may have explained it to you guys or not.
Not the poor side of inner west, the good side of inner west.
You're going to have people that cannot afford anymore in the eastern suburbs that may have rented there or lived there for a while, and they've just.
I thought those are the North Shore people. I'm gonna get killed.
They're going to be
Lower north or upper north? Lower north.
You'll see that.
Oh, you
You'll see
really
that.
pissed
It's
them off.
the next
Because
best
it's
thing
always
for
this side of the bridge or that side of the bridge.
them.
No, you're right. You're right.
It'll be this side of Parramatta Road now. That'll be the new saying.
I reckon the Northwest Corridor. Actually, I think the Southwest Corridor is really undervalued compared to the Northwest Corridor. And as the Aerotropolis comes, and if they can create that little employment hub right there,
Where does Sean think?
yeah. We've got producer Anna is kicking us out in 2 minutes, guys. So if we seem rushed while Sean answers it, Sean's answer.
ready.
What is your suburb?
The suburb that I'm picking for percentage performance in 2022 from Growth is Botanic Ridge.
Botanic Ridge. That is a Melbourne pick. You know,
Strategic.
should I just bet on Logan? It'll work out. It should be all right.
Sure, right. Logan's right up there. I'm not joking. Logan is right up there.
I mean, like, if you really think about it, like your Logan pocket, for example, and I know Logan used to be rough. A lot of pockets were very rough before they weren't. It's strategically placed between Brisbane and Gold Coast, and if that corridor is developed well, which people are putting in a lot of effort, and there's some dodgy old Logan, but the new Logan is pretty
beautiful.
Sweet.
New Logan's beautiful.
New Logan's pretty sweet, I must say. You got to see it to believe it. But on that note, ladies and gentlemen, this has been Friday Night Live, another episode. Our predictions for 2022. Hope you got some value. If you've got any questions, leave us some comments, give us some engagement, share it with someone who will get value out of this. On that note, Sean, Mark, thank you for joining me again. This has been another amazing episode. And producer Anna, we love you. Thank you for doing this for us. And special shout out to the Hills Podcast Studio for doing this for us. Till next time, bye for now. Which camera?